Hi everyone, I'm Will Burns from your Property Associates and welcome to another episode of Building Better Investors. The aim of the series is simple. It's to help property investors, developers and sources make better decisions by understanding what really happens from purchase through to project completion. In the last episode we looked at the 5 main duty holders under the CDM regs. Now, as a reminder, those are the client, the principal designer, the principal contractor and the contractor. We looked at what each role is, who's responsible for what, and why investors and developers need to understand who is doing what before work start on site. So in this episode we're going to look at the 3 key documents that help demonstrate a project has been properly planned and managed under the CDM regs. So for anyone who's not aware of them documents, the 3 documents I'm going to be talking about are the pre-construction information, which normally is referred to as the PCI, the construction phase plan, which is referred to as the CPP, and the health and safety file. Now these documents are not just paperwork for the sake of paperwork. They are there to show that risks have been identified, information has been shared, the work has been planned effectively and properly, and that the right people understand their responsibilities. Also, should the worst happen, these are the types of documents that will show what was known, what was communicated, and what arrangements were put in place prior to the works going ahead. So let's get into the first one, which is pre-construction information. As I said, it's also referred to as a PCI, and the pre-construction information is exactly sort of what it says on the tin. It's the information known about the project, the site, the building, and the risks before construction work begins. So in simple terms, it's the information the project team needs so that they're not working blind. Now, the information in this can include things like the existing drawings for the building, asbestos information, structural information, any surveys that have been carried out, any service locations, access restrictions, neighbouring properties, if there's any existing hazards, fire safety information, planning conditions, previous health and safety files, or anything that may be unusual about the property that could affect the works. So in the property world, this is massive. If you're buying an older property to refurbish, convert, extend or develop, your team needs to know what they're sort of walking into. So is there asbestos? Are there live services? Are there structural issues? Are there fragile roofs? Are there rotten floors? And what's the access to the property like? Is it restricted? Is there alleyways? Is there narrow roads, for instance? Are there tenants? Is there neighbours, members of the public nearby that could be affected by the works? Are there drainage issues, damp issues, old electrics, or has there been any unknown alterations that might affect the safety of the building? That information needs to be gathered and shared early. So for a commercial client such as an investor, developer, limited company, SPV, it's your responsibility to make sure the relevant pre-construction information is provided to the designers and the contractors. Now, the principal designer will usually help pull that information together and coordinate it during the pre-construction phase. But ultimately, the commercial client, or as the commercial client, you need to make sure that the project team has the information they need. That is your responsibility. The process should start before works begin, so not once people are already on site. It's pre-construction. So you gather what information is available, you identify what's missing, then once you've done that, you arrange the surveys that are needed, and once they're completed, you issue the information to the people designing, pricing and planning works. Now imagine if a contractor is pricing a job without understanding the full risks. You can imagine that the price is probably going to be wrong, and with health and safety it can be quite expensive. And if the team starts without the right information, as I say, the project's probably already exposed. The second document I wanted to speak about is the construction phase plan. often referred to as a CPP or the Bible. It's a live document. CPP is a document that explains how the construction phase will be managed safely. In plain English, it answers the question, how are we actually going to build this safely? So the construction phase plan must be prepared before construction work begins. Now, as we said before, where there is more than one contractor, the principal contractor is responsible for preparing it. And where there is only one contractor, then that contractor will prepare it. But for you as a commercial client, it is your responsibility to make sure that a suitable construction phase plan has been prepared before the construction phase starts. A construction phase plan should be proportionate to the size and complexity of the project. So for a small refurbishment, it doesn't need to be the same sort of level of detail as what a major development would need, but it does still need a plan. A good construction phase plan will cover things like who's involved in the project, who are the duty holders, the project description, what are the site rules, how is the site going to be secured, what are the welfare arrangements, the first aid arrangements, the fire and emergency procedures for the site, how trades will be coordinated, and how deliveries, skips, storage and waste will be managed on the site as well. It will also refer to any specific risks that are specific to that project and how they'll be controlled. So for example, if you're doing a refurbishment, is there an asbestos plan? If there's walls being removed, is there a structural sequence? If the roofing work's taking place, how are you going to control the work at height and the risks associated with that? If the property is in a tight residential street, how are deliveries, skips and neighbours going to be managed? Or if it's near a school, how are the deliveries going to be managed with the timings of the school? If gas, water or electric services are being altered, who's going to isolate them, and when are they going to isolate them? What are their competencies? So that's what the construction phase plan is about. It's not a generic document. As I say, it's a live document, and it's it should reflect the actual job, the actual site, and the actual risks associated with the works it's referring to. So the process should be quite straightforward with the construction phase plan. The pre-construction information feeds into construction phase plan. The principal contractor reviews the risk, plans the work, coordinates with the client and the principal designer, and prepares the plan before anyone starts on site. Then, as I say, it's a live document, so as the project changes, the CPP should be reviewed and updated in line, because we all know how construction projects move. The risks change, trades overlap, designs change, but ultimately the plan should be kept up to date with the reality of what's actually going on. The third document I want to speak about is the health and safety file. The health and safety file is a legacy document. Now, it's important not to confuse the health and safety file for an O&M manual. For anyone who knows what an O&M manual is, they're not the same thing. So an O&M manual is usually an operational handover document. So that will tell the client or building owner how to operate, maintain and manage the building and its systems. So that might include things such as product data, warranties, operating instructions, maintenance schedules, commissioning certificates, and manufacturer's information. Whereas the health and safety file is slightly different. The health and safety file is an actual CDM document, and it focuses on the health and safety information that anyone that be working on a building in future may need, if they're going to maintain, alter, refurbish or demolish the building later on. So there can be a slight overlap between the two. So for example, you might have as-built drawings, service locations, safe access information, fire safety information, or details of significant residual risks. So they may be relevant to both. But health and safety file should not just become a full copy of an O&M manual. so you've got to be careful when you're submitting them. It should include or refer to the information that is relevant only to future health and safety. So, for example, were there any steel beams? Where are the hidden services? Are there any significant structural assumptions? Are there any unused materials that may be useful? Is there any asbestos remaining? Maybe it's just been encapsulated. Are there any fragile surfaces or restricted areas that they need to be aware of? And are there safe access requirements for future maintenance? So that particularly in sort of blocks of flats, that may be for like external windows and stuff. Are there any residual risks for that future contractors may need to know about? So yeah, the health and safety file, that sort of information belongs in the health and safety file. Where a project involves more than one contractor, that responsibility falls on the principal designer. But whilst the responsibility falls on the principal designer, the information comes from the whole project team. So designers, contractors, and the principal designer all need to provide information, relevant information as the project progresses, so it can be collated. And for a commercial client, you need to make sure the health and safety file is prepared, updated where necessary, and made available to anyone who may need it for future work on the property or building. And this is where investors and developers need to think beyond completion day. And especially if you own the building, or if you're passing it on, because the project doesn't end when the last trade leaves the site. If you sell the property, the next owner may need that information if they're going to carry out works. As I said before, if you're going to keep it, you're going to rent it out. Your maintenance team may need to know the information that's held within that file. So if you refinance and do another phase of works later, your future contractors will definitely need it. So yeah, as I say, it's definitely worth keeping and collating. And if something goes wrong, people may ask, what did you do? What information was provided? What was planned? What was recorded? So these documents, they matter, because even after, once you've done the construction phase plan, everything else isn't there. The health and safety file will be with the building for the lifespan of the building. So it's a really important document to make sure that you complete at the end of every project. So just to recap then, pre-construction information identifies what is known, the known risks before work starts. The construction phase plan explains how the construction work will be managed safely during the build, and the health and safety file records the key health and safety information required for future works. Now, all three together create a paper trail. They show that the risk was considered before the project started, it was managed while the work was happening, and it's all been accurately recorded and properly recorded for any sort of future works. So no pre-construction information, no construction phase plan, and no health and safety file where there should be one, or where one is required. I would sort of look at as that not being a professional project. It is ultimately being run on hope, and especially with sort of bigger developments and sort of more complex refurbishments, I'd like to think that hope wouldn't be a strategy for your capital. So for investors, developers and sources, this isn't about becoming health and safety experts. It's just making sure, knowing what good health and safety looks like. As I say, health and safety is everyone's responsibility. It's just about knowing what question to ask before you fund a deal, buy a project, appoint a contractor, or recommend any opportunity to someone else, because a strong deal on paper can become a really expensive problem if the construction side isn't being managed properly. I mean, the cost for materials is astronomical as it is. So, before work start, ask your contractor, has the pre-construction information, ask yourself, has the pre-construction information been gathered and issued? Then, has your contractor put together a construction phase plan, a suitable one for the project, bespoke to the project? and where required, who's responsible for preparing the health and safety file, and how are they going to collate that information. And if them questions can't be answered, it should tell you something, so just be aware of that. Now in the next episode we're going to look at another area that causes a lot of confusion, so that is, when does a project become notifiable on the CDM? So in other words, when do we need to formally notify the HSE that we're carrying out a project? So if you want to know more about when notification is required under CDM, and more construction and project management insights that all investors and developers should understand, then make sure you follow along, because we've got loads more lessons to come. I'm Will Burns from your Property Associates. This has been Building Better Investors. Plan better, build smarter, invest safer, and I'll see you on the next one.